Somebody help me, I am dying. This thing is too heavy. What kind of pot is this?
What are you doing with this big pot on your head?
Ooh, my lovely wives. I noticed that the pot you are using to cook at home is too small. So on my way coming, I decided to buy this big pot. Help me bring down this big pot from my head.
You will not believe why Gbega, the street landlord, carried a big pot on his head. Long before modern buildings cover every corner of Osogbo, when dusty roads stretched across the town and giant mango trees stood proudly along every street. Every morning, the sound of roosters crowing woke the people before sunset. Women swept the front of their compounds with local brooms made from palm leaves. The smell of hot pepper and akara filled the cool morning air as food sellers prepared breakfast for customers. Farmers carried their hoes on their shoulders as they walked towards their farms, while traders balanced baskets of goods on their heads on their way to the busy market. In the evenings, elderly men gathered under large trees to tell stories about their ancestors, while children chased one another around the compounds until their mothers called them home. Everyone in Osogbo knew one another. Good news spread quickly from house to house, and bad news traveled even faster. It was a town where person's characters was known better than the clothes they wore. Among all the people living in Osogbo, there was one man whose name almost everyone knew. His name was Gbega, but few people called him by that name. Throughout the town, everyone simply called him the street landlord. It was not because he was the richest man in Osogbo. It was not because he owned many houses. In fact, he owned only one family house his late father had left behind. People called him the street landlord because from sunrise until set, he behaved as though every road, every junction, every street belongs to him. If anyone was looking for Gbega, they never needed to search for long. He could always be found sitting comfortably under the giant almond tree at the main junction with one leg crossed over other. Sometimes he sat on an old wooden bench. Sometimes he sat on an empty paint bucket. Other times he simply spread an old sack on the ground and relaxed as if he had no worries in the world. Morning after morning, days after days, months after months, his route never changed. People passing by would greet him, "Good morning, Gbega." Instead of standing up respectfully like other men, he would lazily wave one hand without even looking at them. Sometimes he stretched himself and yawned loudly, while others were already sweating from hard work. The old men often laughed whenever they saw him. "There goes the king of laziness," one elder would say. Another would shake his head. If sleeping and talking could make someone rich, Gbega would be the weirdest man in Osogbo. The women pitied his family. Whenever they passed him on their way to the market carrying heavy loads on their head, they whispered among themselves, "See him sitting there again. His wives are working while he's enjoying himself. What kind of man behaves like this?" Even the children copied him for fun. They pushed out their chests, raised their shoulders proudly, and walked slowly through the street, pretending to be Gbega. Whenever adults saw them, everyone burst into laughter. Some children even sang funny songs about him. Gbega heard them many times, but instead of feeling ashamed, he smiled proudly, as though they were praising him. Yet behind that proud appearance, behind the expensive borrowed clothes, behind the loud laughter and fake confidence, there was a man whose life was slowly falling apart without him even realizing it. Years earlier, Gbega's father had been one of the most respected men in Osogbo. His father's name was spoken with honor everywhere people gathered. He was known as a hardworking farmer who never cheated anyone. Before the first cock crowed each morning, he was already on his way to the farm. He cultivated cocoa, he planted yam, he grew maize and cassava. He also traded in palm oil, kola nuts, and dried pepper during market days. His honesty made people trust him. Whenever poor widows needed help, he quietly assisted them without expecting anything in return. Because of his good character, blessings followed him. His cocoa farm stretched across fertile land outside Osogbo. Rows of healthy cocoa trees stood proudly with ripe pods hanging from their branches. Palm trees surrounded parts of his farmland. During harvest season, workers were always busy gathering crops. He built a modest but comfortable family house with wide rooms and a large courtyard where children could play safely. His compound was always neat. His barns were always full. After every harvest, people admired him because everything he owned came through honest hard work. Sadly, as every human being must one day answer the call of nature, Gbenga's father eventually became old. After a brief illness, he passed away peacefully. The whole town mourned him. Market women cried openly. Farmers gathered to pay their last respect. The elders praised the good life he had lived. After the burial, all his properties were handed over to his only son, Gbega. The elders were happy. His father has left him a good foundation, they said. If Gbega worked half as hard as his father, he will become an even greater man. His relatives encouraged him. His late father's friend offered to guide him. Experienced farmers volunteered to help him manage the cocoa plantation. But Gbega had already made up his mind. He had no interest in farming. He had no interest in business. He believed inherited wealth would last forever. Each passing year, inheritance became smaller. Yet, Gbega simply did not care. Whenever people advised him to return to farming, he laughed. He often said, "Why would I suffer under the hot sun? My father has already worked enough for me. I did not inherit poverty. I inherited comfort." Those words became his daily excuse. Every morning, while hardworking people hurried towards their farms, workshops, mechanic shops, tailoring center, and busy markets, Gbega was already sitting beneath the giant almond tree beside the junction. That tree became his office, his meeting hall, his place of business. Though no business was ever done there, around him gathered other lazy men who loved gossiping more than hard work. Some claimed they were looking for jobs. Others always had one excuse or another. They preferred sitting under the tree all day. One man would bring an old draft board. Another would produce bottle tops, used as playing pieces. Then the games would begin. Hours passed. Morning became afternoon. Afternoon slowly turned into evening. The sun moved across the sky while they remained in the same place. To him, winning a draft game was more important than any money to feed his family. If anyone interrupted him, suggested he should go and work, he became angry. "Leave me alone," he would reply. "Must somebody work every day before he enjoy life?" The people simply shook their heads and walked away. Gbega loved those moments beneath the tree. There were no responsibilities there, no school fees, no crying children, no hungry mouths to feed. For a few hours each day, he pretended his problem did not exist. But back inside his family's compound, reality was completely different. Gbega had 3 wives. The first one was Morenike. She was calm, patient, and respectful. She rarely argued with anyone. Whenever problem came, she preferred praying and hoping for better days. The second wife was Bisi. She was hardworking, bold, and outspoken. She hated injustice and was never afraid of telling Gbega the truth, even when it made him angry. The youngest wife was Shade. She was cheerful, kind-hearted, and always smiling despite the struggle around her. She believed that one day God would change their situation. Together, the 3 wives had many children. The compound was always filled with children's voices. Some were babies crawling on the floor. Some attended primary school. Others had reached secondary school. Neighbors often joked that Gbenga's compound looked more like a small primary school than a family house. One elderly woman laughed one afternoon and said, "If they build one more room in this compound, they should employ a headmaster too." Everyone laughed, but behind the jokes was a painful truth. Feeding such a large family was becoming more difficult every single day. School fees piled up every time. Exercise books had to be bought. School uniforms became tore and patched repeatedly. Sometimes there were no money to buy sandals, so some of the younger children walked barefoot. Whenever heavy rain fell, water leaked through the old roof into the rooms. The wives rushed around, placing buckets under the leaking spots, while their children squeezed themselves into dry corners. The walls had started cracking. The wooden doors no longer closed properly. The once beautiful family house, inherited from Gbenga's father, was slowly falling apart. Yet, their husband behaved as though none of those problems concerned him. Instead, his wives became both mothers and fathers to their children. Before the first rooster crowed early morning, Morenike was already awake, grinding beans to prepare akara and beans cake for sale. Bisi arranged fresh vegetables, tomatoes, pepper, onions, and okra into baskets before leaving for the market. Shade cooked rice, beans, and local soup, which she sold beside the busy motor park, where travelers often stopped to eat. Every day, they worked tirelessly under the hot sun. Sometimes, they returned home long after darkness had covered the town. Their feet ached, their back hot, yet they still cooked dinner, washed clothes, helped the children with homework, and prepared for another day of hard work. The little money they made paid school fees, bought food, purchased medicine whenever the children became sick, settled rent for their market stores, bought firewood and cooking gas, repaired leaking roofs whenever they could, and somehow, against all odds, they managed to keep the family alive. Meanwhile, Gbega contributed absolutely nothing. Sometimes hunger disturbed him while his wives were away. Instead of looking for work, he quickly sneaked into whichever wife's room was empty. He searched beneath wrappers, inside wooden boxes, under pillows, behind old bags. If he found food, he ate everything without leaving a single morsel behind. If he found money, he quickly slipped it into his pocket and walked away, as though nothing had happened. Sometimes his wife returned home only to discover that the soup meant for the children had disappeared. Other times, they noticed money kept aside for school fees was missing. They did not need anyone to tell them who had taken it. Still, whenever they confronted Gbega, he denied everything. "You women complain too much," he always say. "Money has wings. Maybe it flew away. If food disappear, perhaps a hungry ghost ate it." His wives could only sigh in disappointment. Everyone in Osogbo knew Gbega was lazy, yet somehow he carried himself like a wealthy chief. He greeted nobody properly. He strutted through the streets proudly, with his chest pushed forward and his shoulders raised high. Sometimes he borrowed expensive native cloth from friends just to impress people. Visitors who saw him for the first time often believed he was an important businessman or a successful politician. Only the people who truly know him understand the truth. They knew the fine clothes belongs to someone else. They knew the smiling man had no job. They knew his hardworking wives carried the burdens of the entire household, while he spent his days doing nothing. But laziness was not Gbenga's greatest weakness. His greatest weakness was women. Whenever a beautiful woman passed by, Gbega immediately forgot every other thing. He chased married women, single women, widows, market traders, hairstylists, food sellers, visitors who came from other towns. He believed every woman would eventually fall for his sweet words. To one woman, he claimed he owned several cocoa plantations outside Osogbo. To another, he proudly said he traveled abroad every year for business. To another, he introduced himself as a successful building contractor. Sometimes, he claimed he supplied goods to the government. Other times, he even lied that his wife had died years earlier, pretending to be a lonely widower searching for love again. His lies changed depending on the woman he wanted to deceive. Yet somehow, many women believed him because he spoke confidently and dressed neatly. His wife repeatedly begged him to change. One cool evening, after supper, Morenike looked at him sadly. "Gbega," she said softly, "one day, these lies will bring disaster into this house. busy fold her arms. You keep entering other people's home as if you have no family. Not every husband will ignore what you are doing. Shade added quickly, please think about your children. They need a father they can be proud of. Not every man is patient. One day, you may meet the wrong person. Gbega burst into loud laughter. He slapped his chest proudly. My dear wives, he replied, you worry too much. I know exactly what I am doing. I have lived like this for years. Nothing will happen. No problem can catch Gbega. The three women exchanged worried glances. None of them argued further. Deep inside their hearts, they felt that something terrible was slowly drawing closer. A storm they could not yet see. A danger they could not yet explain. But while hardworking people prepare for another busy day, Gbega had a complete different plan. At morning, he woke up much earlier than usual. His three wives were surprised. Normally, they had to wake him several times before he finally left his bed. But on this particular Saturday, he was already stretching his body before the first rooster finished crowing. For a brief moment, Morenike smiled. She thought perhaps her husband had finally decided to look for work. Maybe he wanted to visit the abandoned cocoa farm. Maybe he had found a new business. Maybe he had finally remembered that his children needed school fees. But her hope disappeared almost immediately. Gbega was not preparing for work. Far from it. After bathing, he rubbed scented pomade into his hair until it shined under the morning light. He trimmed his small beard carefully with a razor. He borrowed a neatly ironed native outfit from one of his friends the previous evening and proudly wore it as though it belongs to him. He polished a pair of borrowed leather sandals until they sparkled. Standing before the cracked mirror hanging on the wall, Gbega admired himself from every angle. He adjusted his cap, straightened his cloth, smiled proudly. Today, he whispered to himself with a proud grin, another beautiful woman will fall deeper in love with me. My sweet words never fail. My charm is too powerful. His wife watched him silently from the doorway. None of them asked where he was going. They always knew. Whenever Gbega dressed this nicely, without attending a family event, there was only one explanation. He was going to visit another woman. Bisi shook her head in disappointment. This man will never change. Shade sighed quietly. I only pray he does not bring trouble into this house. Morenike looked towards to the sky and whispered a short prayer. God, please protect him from the consequences of his own action. Gbega ignored every one of them. Instead, he proudly whistled a popular highlife tune as he walked out of the compound. His shoulders were raised high. His chest was pushed forward. Anyone seeing him for the first time would think he was an important chief or a successful businessman. He greeted young women along the road with unnecessary confidence. Some smiled politely, others ignored him completely. But Gbega did not care. In his mind, every woman admired him. He walked through several streets before arriving at a quiet compound near the edge of Osogbo. The compound was peaceful. Flower plants decorated the entrance. Every look clean and well arranged. Inside that compound lived a beautiful woman named Tawa. Tawa was known for her smooth skin, gentle smile, and soft voice. Whenever she spoke, people listened carefully. For several months, she had entertained Gbega with warm smiles and sweet conversations. Whenever Gbega visited her, she welcomed him warmly. She laughed at his jokes. She praised his appearance. Whenever he exaggerated stories about his imaginary wealth, Gbega had completely fallen for her. Several times, he had asked about her husband. Each time, she answered with sadness, "My husband died while walking far away. I have been lonely ever since." Sometimes, she even pretended to wipe tears from her eyes. Gbega believed every single word. He felt lucky. He often bragged to his useless friends under the almond tree. "Very soon, I will marry another beautiful woman. My wives can never stop me." His friends laughed and encouraged him. That Saturday morning, Tiwa welcomed him with her usual sweet smile. "You came early today. I have been expecting you." Gbega smiled proudly. "I could not stay away from you. You are the only woman who truly understands me." Tiwa laughed softly and invited him inside. She served him hot pounded yam with rich egusi soup filled with assorted meat and fresh fish. The aroma alone made Gbenga mouth water. He washed his hand quickly and started eating like a man who had not seen food for days. He swallowed one bowl of pounded yam after another. He licked the soup from his fingers. He even asked for more. Tawa served him another large portion. By the time he finished eating, his stomach had become round like a drum. He leaned back happily and released a large belch. "My dear Tawa," he said proudly, "no woman cook like you. If only you knew how badly I am suffering. My wives don't know how to treat a real man." Tawa smiled without saying anything. Gbenga continued boasting. He told her he was planning to buy another house. He claimed he had many plots of land waiting to be developed. He promised to buy her expensive gold jewelries. He even promised to marry her before the ending of the year. Tawa simply nodded as though she believed every word. Suddenly, the sound of a motorcycle echoed loudly outside the compound. The engine stopped. A moment later, the heavy metal gate slammed shut with a loud bang. Then came a sound of a strong footstep, walking confidently towards the house. The cheerful atmosphere inside the room disappeared immediately. Tawa froze. The plate she was holding slipped from her trembling hands and crashed onto the floor. Her face turned completely pale. Fear filled her eyes. "Oh no," she whispered. "My husband is back." At first, Gbenga laughed carelessly. "What husband? I thought you told me your husband is dead." Tawa grabbed his hand tightly. Her entire body was shaking. Her voice became almost a whisper. "He's not dead. He's alive. He is a military officer. He traveled for an assignment. I did not know he would return today." The words struck Gbenga like thunder. The smile disappeared from his face instantly. His heartbeat pounded so loudly that he could almost hear it. His mouth became dry. His knee grew weak. Sweat poured down his forehead. Despite the cold morning breeze, for the first time in many years, Gbenga truly feared for his life. He had heard many stories about soldiers, stories of discipline, stories of courage, stories of men who fear nobody. He imagined the officer catching him inside another man's house. His heart nearly stopped. Without wasting another second, Gbenga rushed towards the back window. He pulled it open. His body could not pass through. He quickly ran into the kitchen, hoping to find another exit. Locked. He looked around desperately. He considered hiding beneath the bed. Impossible. The space was too narrow. He glanced behind the curtains. His legs were clearly visible. He looked inside a wardrobe. It was too small. Every possible hiding place had failed him. Outside, the footstep came even closer. Each step sounded heavier than the last. Then came a loud firm knock on the front door. Tawa opened the door. The deep commanding voice alone was enough to make Gbenga almost collapse. His teeth began chattering. His hands shook uncontrollably. His breath became fast. He whispered nervously, "I am finished. My life has ended today." Tawa paced around the room in panic, searching desperately for a solution. Suddenly, her eyes landed on an enormous old brass pot resting in one corner of the room. It was much bigger than an ordinary cooking pot. The pot had been covered carefully with a large lid. An idea flashed through her mind. She immediately turned towards Gbenga. Listening carefully, she spoke in a hurried whisper. "When my husband enters, you are a goldsmith. You came to repair this old family pot. Do not argue. Just agree with everything I say." Gbenga nodded repeatedly without thinking. At that moment, he would have agreed to become anything. A goldsmith, a carpenter, a plumber, even a herbalist. Anything was better than being caught inside another man's house. The door finally opened. A tall military officer stepped inside. His polished black boots echoed loudly across the floor. His uniform was neatly pressed. His face looked serious. His eyes carefully searched every corner of the room. He carried himself with confidence and authority. Without saying a word, he looked directly at Gbenga. Gbenga immediately lowered his eyes respectfully. He dared not breathe. His heart continued beating. widely inside his chest. Tawa forced a nervous smile. My husband. This man is a goldsmith. Our whole family pot developed a crack. He came to carry it for repairs. The military officer remained silent. He slowly looked at Gbega from head to toe. Then he looked at the huge brass pot. The room became completely quiet. Several long seconds passed. To Gbega, those few seconds felt like many hours. Finally, the officer nodded slowly. If that is the case, you may take the pot. Gbega almost sighed in relief. He thanked God silently. He quickly bent down and tried to lift the giant brass pot by himself. To his surprise, he refused to move. He pulled harder. Nothing happened. The pot felt unbelievably heavy. His eyes widened in confusion. What kind of pot is this? What could possibly be inside? Something this heavy. He wanted to ask, but this was not the right time for questions. The only thing on his mind was escaping safely. Together, Tawa and Gbega bent down. Both of them struggled with all their strength. Little by little, they managed to raise the giant brass pot from the floor. With grateful effort, they balanced it carefully on Gbenga's head. Immediately, the weight settled on his neck. His body bent slightly. His legs trembled. His shoulders burned with pain. He almost cried out, but he forced himself to remain calm. He could not complain. He could not ask questions. He simply wanted to leave the compound alive. With slow, painful steps, Gbega staggered out of the house, carrying the mysterious giant pot on his head. Every step felt heavier than the previous one. As he walked through the busy streets of Osogbo, sweat poured down his face. His neck ached terribly. His breathing became difficult. Yet he had no idea that carrying that mysterious pot would soon become the greatest humiliation of his entire life. Every step Gbega took felt heavier than the last. The giant brass pot pressed painfully against his neck. His back bent under the heavy weight. His legs shook as though they would give way at any moment. Sweat soaked his borrowed native cloth. His face became red. His breathing grew faster. He wished he could stop and rest for a few minutes, but he dared not. He wanted to get as far away from Tawa's house as possible. Inside his mind, he kept saying, just keep walking. Do not stop. Once you leave this area, you are safe. But the pot became heavier with every step. It felt as though someone inside was adding more stone every minute. Gbega could not understand it. What kind of brass pot is this? He whispered to himself. It feels heavier than a bag of cement. His neck ached terribly. His shoulders burned with pain. His arms felt weak. His knees almost touched the ground several times. Still, he struggled forward. As he entered the main road, people immediately noticed him. Everyone knew Gbega was a lazy man who spent his days under the almond tree playing drafts. Seeing him carrying such a huge load shocked the whole neighborhood. Market women stopped arranging their goods. Motorcyclists slowed down to look at him. Passengers inside buses stretched their necks through the windows. Children abandoned their games. People began whispering among themselves, "It's not that Gbega. What happened today?" As he finally started walking, an elderly woman selling roasted corn laughed loudly. "Gbega, when did you become a potter? I thought carrying load was only for hardworking people." The people around her burst into laughter. Another elderly man adjusted his cap and smiled. Maybe poverty has finally chased him away from that almond tree. One young man added jokingly, "I think hard work has finally caught up with him." Everyone laughed again. Gbega forced a weak smile. He did not have the strength to argue with anyone. Inside his heart, he cursed the heavy brass pot. If I knew carrying this thing would be this difficult, I would have remained inside that house. He looked up at the sky and murmured, "God, please save me today. What kind of blacksmith work like this? This pot is trying to kill me. If I survive today, I will never visit another man's wife again. I will stay inside my house. I will even help my wives at the market. This thing wants to destroy me." He groaned loudly. "My neck is breaking. I cannot breathe. Somebody help me. What is inside this pot? It is too heavy." Several people heard him, but instead of helping him, most of them laughed. One woman replied, "If you carried it by yourself, carry it to where you are going." Another man shouted, "You are a strong man. You can manage." Some boys walking behind him began singing funny songs. Gbega has become a laborer. He wished someone could help him, but fate had prepared something far worse. From the opposition direction came his 3 wives. They were dressed beautifully in matching blue and gold asoebi. Their colorful hair ties matched perfectly. Each of them carried a small handbag. They were laughing together as they headed towards a Saturday wedding ceremony. As they drew closer, they suddenly stopped. All 3 stared at the strange sight before them. For a few seconds, they could not believe their eyes. Was this really their husband? The same Gbega who refused to carry even a bucket of water at home. The same man who always complained whenever he was asked to help. Now, he was carrying an enormous bracelet on his head. When Nike blinked, she rubbed her eyes. "Babatunde, what exactly are you doing?" Bisi folded her arms and narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Since when did you start carrying heavy load? Who forced you to do this?" Shade looked at the giant pot with surprise. "Where did you even get such a huge pot? It is bigger than every cooking pot in our house." People nearby stopped walking. They wanted to hear Gbenga's explanation. Gbega swallowed nervously. His mouth suddenly became dry. His heart began to beat faster again. He could not possibly tell them the truth. How could he explain that he was coming from another woman's house? How could he explain why he was carrying a strange pot? For a moment, words refused to come out. He looked from one wife to another. Then he forced a smile. "My lovely wives, I have been thinking about all of you. You work so hard every day. I noticed the pot you use for cooking at home are too small. So I decided to surprise all of you. I bought this bigger pot. You deserve something better." The 3 women looked at one another. Their face showed complete disbelief. For years, Gbega had never bought them a cooking spoon. Whenever they needed new pots, they saved their own money to buy them. He had never contributed a single naira. Now, he expected them to believe that he had suddenly bought the biggest pot in Osogbo. It made absolutely no sense. Bisi looked at him carefully. "Gbega, are you sure you are telling us the truth?" Before he could answer, the weight of the pot became unbearable. His knees almost gave way. He cried out dramatically, "My neck is breaking. Please help me bring it down before I die." The wives exchanged worried glances. Despite everything their husband had done to them over the years, they still felt sorry for him. Morenike sighed. "No matter what, he is still our husband." The 3 women stepped forward together. One held the side of the heavy bracelet. Another supported the bottom carefully. The third steadied Gbega so he could not fall. Slowly, don't rush, be careful. Little by little, they lowered the enormous pot from Gbenga's head. The moment it touched the ground, everyone breathed a sign of relief. Gbega quickly stretched his aching neck. He rubbed his painful shoulders. He was about to thank his wives. Then something unbelievable happened without warning. The heavy lid suddenly flew open. A frightened young man jumped out of the giant bracelet like a person escaping from danger. His eyes were filled with fear. His clothes were soaked with sweat. Without saying a single word, he landed on the ground, then took off at full speed. He ran through the crowd like a lightning. People standing in front of him quickly jumped aside. Some fell into a nearby gutter. Others dropped their basket of tomato and pepper. The young man never looked back. Within seconds, he disappeared into another street. For one brief moment, the entire neighborhood became completely silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. Everyone stared at the open bracelets in complete shock. Then, panic exploded everywhere. Women screamed loudly. Children cried and ran towards their mothers. Market traders abandoned their stores. Motorcyclists quickly turned around. Some people fell while trying to escape. Others climbed nearby fence. One elderly man shouted, "Evil has entered this street." Gbega himself screamed louder than everyone else. "My ancestors, what is happening?" Without waiting for any explanation, he turned around and ran as fast as his entire leg could carry him. His borrowed sandals slipped off his feet. But he did not stop to pick them up. His 3 wives also ran in different directions. Their handbags flew, their beautiful hair ties loosed and dropped onto the road. Fear had completely taken over. Within minutes, the entire neighborhood was in total confusion. People slowly returned after realizing nothing was chasing them. They gathered around the mysterious brace pot. Nobody dared touch it. Instead, they stood at a safe distance, whispering fearfully. Did you all see that? A full-grown man came out of that pot. How is that even possible? Who carries a human being inside a cooking pot? Another woman whispered. I have never seen such thing in my entire life. Another elderly man shook his head slowly. This matter is bigger than we think. Rumors spread through Osogbo faster than wildfire. Before the sun set that evening, almost everyone in town had heard the strange story, but each person told it differently. Some claimed Gbega was a kidnapper who had been caught transporting his victim. Others insisted he belonged to a dangerous secret society. A few believed he was performing a forbidden rituals. Some even swore that the young man had disappeared into thin air. By sunset, every compound had its own version of the story. Some versions were true, many were completely false, but none of them knew what had really happened. No one knew why that terrifying young man had hidden inside the giant brace pot. No one knew who he really was. No one knew why he had run away without saying a single word. And no one knew that the reason the young man hid inside the big pot was the same reason why Gbega carried the big pot on his head. Thanks guys for watching this video. Please subscribe to this channel to watch more of our amazing stories. Like, share, and do not forget to tell us the country or the cities you are watching from. Thank you guys. We love you all.